So I thought I'd do a quick video on hardness of steel, and this plays into the quality of steel, and it's definitely one of the many factors that go into why a high-end knife is more money than your typical department store, gas station, crappy quote-unquote knife. This all factors down to carbon. When you add carbon into iron, you make something called steel. And when you add enough carbon into the steel, you unlock the ability to manipulate some of the characteristics of that steel. Something called heat treating. And so what you do with a knife, this is very basic. We heat it up super hot to the point where the steel actually isn't magnetic anymore. And then you cool it very quickly. And this basically changes the internal structure, the grain structure inside of the steel, and makes it very hard. If you do it right, you're getting that steel as hard as it can get. And we can manipulate the hardness and toughness and softness and stuff of steel in this manner. When you get a steel very hard, the problem is it's also very brittle, kind of like glass. So glass is very hard. If you've ever tried to sand glass or whatever, it's extremely hard. But as soon as you try and bend it, it just breaks because it's very brittle. And so that's no good for a knife blade. So after we do the quench, which is where we cool it very quickly to get that hardness, we then have to do a secondary process called tempering. And that's where you heat the steel in a very controlled manner at very low or much lower temperatures. And that brings the hardness down a little bit. But as the hardness comes down, the toughness comes up. And you can adjust that to find a happy medium based on your case use. So, for example, if you've got a chef knife, that knife's not going to get abused too much, unless you drop it accidentally. And when you sharpen, it's going to be in a very controlled manner with a very nice, setup. And so sharpening is not going to be a big issue. So you can make that knife a little bit harder and less tough because you want it to hold an edge for a long time. You want it to stay sharp. Whereas, say, with an axe, that thing's going to get abused. It's getting swung and beat, and it's going to be hitting stuff, and maybe it's missing and hitting rocks or whatever. So you want that to be very tough, and it's easier to sharpen. Say you're out in the woods, you're chopping some firewood. You don't have a nice controlled setup. You're swatting mosquitoes. You just need to take a file or a stone or whatever, put an edge back on that thing really quick, or even like a hunting knife. Say you're cleaning an animal and you go through a little bit of hair and bone or whatever and it gets dull. You want to be able to sharpen that really quickly. And so you're losing a little bit of that edge retention because it's a little bit softer, but also it's a little tougher. It can handle a little more abuse. If you need to chop through like a sternum or whatever, if it's, you're dropping it on the ground and it's banging off a rock when you're doing something, whatever, it's a little bit tougher in that regard. And so there's all these different levels where we can adjust based on the case use and based on how much carbon is in that particular steel. And that's, like I say, that's the ability to do that and tune the steel of that knife to your use case is one of the things that just skyrockets a quality knife versus, your typical department store junk for $50. Now you know.